Solution Talk. Forging City Industry Alliances for Climate Neutrality Markets. Please welcome to the stage Shana Maunze from Enable, Belgian Agency for International Cooperation.
Ladies and gentlemen, guten Tag, or Moin, as I just learned. Good afternoon in German. My name is Shana, and I'm really happy to be here. I flew in all the way from Mozambique in Africa, more than 12 hours to be here, and I had a flight canceled, so I'm really excited to be here. But today we're on a very interesting session called Forging City Industry Partnerships for Climate Neutrality Markets. It's being organized by ICLEI Europe, the Local Governments for Sustainability Europe. And I'm really excited today because we're going to be talking about something that's very close to my heart, the connections between city and industry and forging alliances around that. We talk a lot about the role of cities in boosting the climate transition, but cities cannot become climate neutral on their own. They need businesses that will innovate, they need governments who will enable this transition, and above it all, they need partnerships. And partnerships are key to drive action from ambition. And back in Africa, we say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Exactly. If you want to go far, go together. And we're going to be talking about that today, about partnerships, about alliances, not solely from specific success stories, but seeing how we can bring these together. So it's my pleasure to be moderating today. And I'm very happy, before we jump into the panel, I want to welcome Mr. Matthew Bach, who is the Regional Director of ICLEI Europe, for the opening remarks. A round of applause, please.
Thank you, Shana. Great to be with you all here this morning, and we're also grateful that there's a bit of cool air coming into the room, right? So my name is Matthew Bach. I'm Regional Director for Europe at ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. For those of you not so familiar with us, we're a global network of over 2,500 local and regional governments active in over 125 countries. And what do we focus on? We focus on how do we make cities sustainable. We work across different levels with the European Union, in the G7 context, and of course in the UN Rio Conventions, where we act as focal points for local authorities. And then our European Secretariat, where I'm based in Freiburg, so in Germany, a little bit further south, but sometimes based on Deutsche Bahn, it can be quite far. We then work on basically helping the cities to do this work in practice with over 100 projects running on all the different areas on how you make cities sustainable, and a lot more and more, how do we then work with industry, with businesses in making this transformation happen. Now, I'd like to frame the challenge with two numbers. The first one is that public procurement in Europe accounts for nearly 1/5 of Europe's GDP. And I think that's quite a significant number to have in mind, because that means also that local governments are really one of the key buyers when you talk about construction, energy, mobility, and all the different solutions that we need. At the same time, the second number is that we're looking at about 650 billion euros of necessary investment just to 2030 if we'd want to make our leading cities, so the cities that are in the EU mission for climate neutral cities, if we want to make them climate neutral by 2030. That's an enormous sum, and it also shows that we have both vast purchasing power and vast investment needed, and that we need to find how to bring these together and create the right levers, and we're not yet doing this successfully, and that's where this conversation comes in. So we see it across Europe with cities moving forward with ambitious plans. I mentioned the EU Cities Mission, where 112 cities have committed to climate neutrality by 2030, and they know what they need. You know, they need the low carbon materials, they need the clean energy, they need the circular solutions, and much more, of course, but we don't have time for the full list. And the demand is there, and industry also knows that, and industry has the solutions. So what we need now is to find how to overcome the market uncertainty, how to create the aggregated demand, and how to create stable policy frameworks. And this is something that we can only do together, because it's not a technological gap, it's a governance gap, and that's something that we need to address as a set of stakeholders all together. Now, how do we close this gap? And I think this is central to the work that we're doing at ICLEI Europe through our City Business Collaboration program. So first, in the EU Cities mission, we're working a lot with our partners on how do you turn this ambition into actual projects and investments. So each city develops a city climate contract, and as part of that, they have an investment plan where they have to really show how they co-design it with their local stakeholders, including businesses as well, to really show how do we create the investments that we need to move forward. We've run also a number of what we call better funding dialogues around Europe. And I think what we saw in Poland, for example, where we worked together with the ministry, with the Association of Municipalities in Poland, is that the era of grants as the key driver for climate action in cities is over and it's not carrying us forward in the way that we need. If we actually want to kind of overcome this gap, and we want to actually finance the transition to net zero in cities, we have to then really bring in the private sector, the financing side, the investment side, and so on. And if we don't do that, we are going to get stuck. So I think this is one of the key things that we're seeing. Alongside this, we've been running city industry dialogues, which we've developed with Climate-KIC and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We've convened them in Madrid, Aalborg, Brussels, Vilnius, Łódź, and Berlin as well. And we're working with a whole number of cities here on how do we create the right framework at a national level to enable these investments, to enable this financing, because even though we have the EU, we very much notice that this works at a national level, that the conditions in one country versus another are not necessarily quite the same. And cities are doing a lot. Malmö alone in Sweden has put in over 100 billion in terms of housing and infrastructure investment. We have cities like Helsinki reusing building materials and circularity. We have Gabrovo, which is working with circular procurement. The list of positive examples is almost endless. But what we need to do is bring them together, push them forward, and institutionalize them in frameworks. And I think that's what we need. In Germany, we've had also then, for example, a series of city industry dialogues called Starke Städte, Gesunde Wirtschaft, Strong Cities, Healthy Economy, where we really brought together the different levels of government, the different sectors, to look at what would this look like, what would success look like, and how do we actually do it? Because it's one thing to make these high-level arguments that we need collaboration and we need investment and so on and so forth. But the trick is to figure out how do we actually make this happen, and that's where you need to get the people at the same table to understand how do we move this forward. And I think that's what we're going to do more and more, also increasingly focusing on the question of circular construction, which is one of the key issues in terms of creating net zero cities. Now, coming back to today, and I think the key point here is that it's not just about Europe, of course. I think that anyone coming to HSC, you all know that. It's about then how can we bring together the solutions that emerge from different parts of the world to see how we can move faster and to look at how the models can travel. And I think this is really one of the key points that we'd like to speak to today. As ICLEI, as a global network, I think we then have this unique position to help carry this forward as a conversation, but of course together with everyone with us. And I think we don't have a whole lot of time. It's very short, unfortunately. So with that in mind, I'd actually like to pass back to Shana to bring in our panel.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I think I heard a lot of solutions during your speech and stakeholder engagement, which is very important why we're here. My environmental economics professor used to always give this example when talking about climate action, picturing a car and 4 people inside the car, but under hot weather, like yesterday or last week. And the windows are closed. Everyone wants to find a solution. The people in the back seat, they can't say to the driver, oh, you need to open the windows. And the one on the passenger seat can't also say, you need to open the windows. We all need to think of a solution to open the windows. And the best way is to talk and to see what can we do to bring solutions forward. And I'm really happy to have an amazing panel today. We have here His Excellency Francis Thoya, Deputy Governor of Mombasa. Here, Mrs. Diana Pretzell from
Mannheim.
Mannheim, yes, Mannheim. And Mrs. Céline Carré Head of Public Affairs. And we would like to maybe initially start with your reflections on the main drivers for this collaboration, and what do you see, especially talking about city and industries, what would be the main drivers for collaboration between the two different cities? What have you seen as positive examples that you would like to share, maybe in 2 minutes or so? We can start with Ms. Carré.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Very happy to be with you. So as you said, yes, I'm leading public affairs with a company called Saint-Gobain, which you may know. We provide solutions in construction, glazing, so you mentioned window, that's it, insulation, gypsum, pipes. And we do that in all lots of environment, EU and non-EU as well, residential, non-residential, infrastructure as well. And Saint-Gobain last year celebrated its 360th anniversary. We've been able to go through the centuries with a focus on innovation, continuity, but also local anchoring. And I think that makes the specificity of our work. I work in policy, so usually I'm used to activate the top-down drivers. So I'll say a word about that, but I had to do that little shift to prepare for here, because being locally anchored as well, this is also the bottom-up catalyst power that we are also able to activate. We see a lot of driver coming from the vision and how consolidated it translates into policy making. So from the EU background, I'd say all of the Green Deal policies are heading into that direction, but then it's not enough, because we need to get the trick of maintaining that over time. And this is where things start to get very slippery. And this is where, in turn, the work that we're doing locally with all the stakeholders can maintain that stability over time. So we've been in Saint-Gobain working a lot on drivers, which we call roadmaps. So the first infancy of building renovation roadmap came like 10 years ago at EU level. And over time, you make them more granular, you make them more specific, you make them more digestible, and also ready to be empowered by local actors. And that's what makes the trick, that's what makes the impact locally. And you judge also the impact with specific KPIs on this. And that's where it takes time. It's not something that comes in one go. So that's one of the drivers that we see. Other drivers, especially in our world, is also to be able to join the dot between policies being conceived top-down and the reality of the construction sector. Construction is local. We want to transform and make affordable housing, make the world a better home is a Saint-Gobain purpose. So how do we get there is to get very local in understanding the needs. So from the national roadmaps to understand how does that translate into regional and city roadmaps. Something that we are quite keen on, especially at the moment, given the multiple challenges on both climate, energy, and also resilience, is to accelerate the digitalization of mapping. Mapping is where you see the potential. So we use it and we promote it to understand where renovation needs are, but also where, for example, we can drive urban densification via lightweight elevation, that we call in buildings. So for that, you can use digital tools, the mapping of the roofs of a city, and out of that, you will derive something very concrete. Yes, and then, I mean, for us in Saint-Gobain, I can maybe say a little later, it's with projects that we would have that interaction with city to understand the needs. So we have also a lot in a school renovation project, for example, or hospital expansion, renovation. Sometimes you can combine the two, all very locally anchored. And some of those projects would also involve the training of local contractors and local professionals. They are the ones joining the dots between the big ambition and what's happening on the ground. And that we do that, I would say, in Europe, but also everywhere. I'm thinking about how we have translated the purpose of Saint-Gobain in a continent like Africa, where we developed the MEIBA version, Make It in Africa, to build Africa. Maybe you've heard of it. So that's really the anchoring of our skills and the competency over time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Diana, what do you think are the main drivers of cooperation? We've heard co-creation, that's what I've heard, not letting policy be driven from a top-down approach, roadmaps, digital mapping. What's your opinion on this matter?
Yeah, thank you that I can be here today in Hamburg. I think it's a great opportunity to drive deep into what industry and our local authority, how they work together. I'm the first mayor of Mannheim, and I think it's important to know that Mannheim is one of the mission cities Matthew was just talking about. So we are one of the European cities that wants to become climate neutral very early. And also, we are an industrial city. We are very industrial. In Mannheim, where the car was invented, the bicycle was invented, the ICE transport system was invented for the fast trains, and so on. So we are really an industrial city. Also, Saint-Gobain was for a long time in Mannheim, so even we are somehow connected. And what is interesting on that is, how can we do this transformation? And what I see is that industry is willing to go forward a lot faster than at least most of the politicians want from the higher, or from the European Union, from the German government. They're not that fast. And I think this is one of our trouble we have as a city, because we see us as working together very close with our industries, and we want to get forward. Also, if we think about the last days, we really have to go forward. I mean, it has to be a lot faster, and everybody's on the brake still. So this is, for us at least, a problem. But what do we do? I think that's interesting for hopefully a lot of people here. We have a local Green Deal team. What does this mean? I think a lot of you know the Green Deal from the European Union. That means it's a program to bring transition into action. And we made this locally. So this team, it's out of 8 people for each of the topics of the Green Deal. Like, one is for industries, one is for traffic, one is for environment, and so on. Yeah. So, and they invented a toolbox with which they go to industries. It has about more than 100 different ideas how industry can do transformation on a lot of different things. And what came out of this into the last now almost 3 years, we're working on that. We have already almost 300 deals that industry is bringing into action. So you see, industry is ready, yeah? And it comes from their production line to that they do a lot for people that working there, and they come to the companies by another way of transit, yeah? So this is very, very different what companies do, but they get ready and they want to do more. And what we also see is that companies are settling in Mannheim that want to be sustainable. They search us as a partner. So, but the problem we have is that the government is not fast enough. Yeah. So actually, we are on the track, but the government is not. So this is at least what we are still suffering from.
Very interesting. I think bringing policy down to the local level, a local EU Green Deal team that can actually look at the policy and then say, what are the solutions for us? What makes sense for us? It's really interesting. So great to hear about what's happening in Mannheim. Now, His Excellency, Mr. Francis, I know Mannheim and Saint-Gobain, they're very different, but we're really interested in hearing what is your perspective on the main drivers of cooperations between cities and industries in the building sector from a perspective in Kenya, Mombasa. Very curious to hear.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. I come from Africa, East Africa, Kenya, and Mombasa. So one, I want to bring the perspective of Africa in terms of decarbonization and what I see to be the levers. Allow me first to put some mathematics, because I believe mathematics are always important. I believe Africa is one of the areas that is rapidly urbanizing. In terms of construction, I think Africa, we are doing almost about 7.5% in terms of space that is urbanizing and we are developing. In the Kenyan context, we are doing slightly higher than what is in Africa. We are at almost 9.1. So what does all this mean? It's obvious that you're going to see a lot of buildings coming up in Africa, because that's where rapid urbanization is. So allow me to maybe share the context of Mombasa, the county I come from. So one of the critical things that we are looking as a county is, as a nation, we have already developed what is called the National Building and Construction Decarbonization Roadmap. This is an overall objective for the country, and it seeks to bring a whole approach on how we are going to deal with decarbonization, and specifically on the construction side. There are immense opportunities, and we believe these immense opportunities could only be things that can be done by the private sector, industries, because government does not have those resources to do most of this thing. So for me, I think one I see as a critical lever is to be able to put a proper framework that establishes a good working relationship between cities and industries. Because for me, once there's a good working partnership around the two, then delivering net zero looks possible ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Francis. I think with your intervention, I'd like to go back to Ms. Diana. I think you mentioned how slow government can be and the role of industries. So I would like to know, what has been your experience with seeing the role of the industrial sector, industries, in driving this transition, especially in the building sector? What has been your experience in Mannheim?
The industry is going their own way, and there is a difference in between the very big industry, yeah, and the smaller one. So the big industry, they have their own system, but they need our help by by the transition of the city itself. Yeah, they want to have good surrounding. They need, of course, energy. This is the most important point for industries. I think this is the reason why industry is staying or not. Yeah, also the price of energy and the price as much as is it there. Yeah, so can you develop together new ways of bringing energy to the really big industries? That's what we are doing at the moment. Yeah, we are just building up the biggest heat pump in the River Rhine. Yeah, the river heat pump. And it's the biggest one in the world. We just have the biggest one of Europe. Now we build the biggest one in the world, because we need this industry. Also, we use geothermal energy, which we have in the ground. So we are doing a big transition from coal industry, what we used to have before, to this. So this is what the big industries need, and we are working on also on other systems like burning how do you say, material from the forest, from the agriculture, from our households, etc. So this can also bring a lot of energy. We are just building up this as well. So this is the one sector. The smaller industries, they need more our help in forms of bringing them on the track to the legacy of the European Union, and to bring them together to bigger projects, not only for industries, also for things like they just build up a system where the green in the city is getting better and is bringing, there are like ways where animals can walk even in between the industrial work, in between the industrial buildings. So this is also something they do together, and we help them to bring things into action, that the city itself is a good place to be. And of course, that's our, from my way, our role, to bring a good surrounding to industries that they can do the transition together with us. And we see this by industries coming to us, yeah, like Osapiens, who just got an Einhorn, unicorn, unicorn. So the development is there.
And this really drives implementation on the ground of some of the big strategic plans.
Yeah, but the easier the way, that's what I said before, the easier the framework is. And this is not only in our hands, it's also in the hands of the other government levels. The easier industry would stay and come. Yeah.
Really good. Ms. Carré, I would like to know what has been your experience in Saint-Gobain. What do you see as the main barriers to this collaboration when it comes to city-industry partnerships?
Okay, thank you. When talking about barrier, my brain moves fast to try to find solutions. We've been discussing a lot barriers, and it's that default attitude when you do policy making, or what are the barriers. So we need to be very focused on it and attach solution exploration. The big barrier, I think, to the fast expansion of this local capacity, because we're talking about capacity building. It's finance, but it's also people able to do those projects. The biggest barrier is a political uncertainty. So absolutely, our solutions need to cope with that, need to build defense against political uncertainty. That's the value of roadmaps. Those roadmaps you were talking about, I think we were involved, are delivering this power. Then those tools, those policies, another barrier is that the role of local actors has not necessarily been well framed. So whenever we do roadmaps, we need to understand, how do I bring ownership to each kind of stakeholder, the financial ones, the industry, the NGOs, the local authorities, and maybe look towards non-usual suspects. I bring that because this was something which was very telling for me. We worked with the World Wimbledon Council and in a project trying to improve a former version of national renovation strategies at EU level. And one of their indicator to do this work was to make sure that they had thought about non-usual suspects. They are key. This can be in the current context, parents from schools, school teacher activating, knowing exactly what they need for that school to sustain both heat and cold, basically. So yeah, so the zigzags, the lack of maybe local empowerment, green public procurement is not yet up to speed. I mean, we talk about long-term life cycle costing, but it's still low-cost derived. So it's something on which we hope maybe the revision of EU public procurement rule will help. We expect that to come this week or a bit later. And then maybe in the financing, in the financing barriers is this granularity to the matchmaking between local finance actor, not only the private one, not only the public one, but the private one. That is lacking, and the local authorities are not able to undertake, at least in some countries, debt. Whereas that's possible at national level. So that needs to be cracked, basically, because we are having projects that bring long-term benefits. So we need to adjust that.
And when you say financing, is it local budgets, or because I think Matthew also mentioned the finance gap to actually drive climate neutrality. How do you see that? What do you see the solution for that? Do you have any examples?
We need a few days to discuss financing. Well, if I take, for example, a topic I'm relatively close to, financing for building renovation for multiple benefits, we need to realize that we cannot just rely on public funding. So there needs to be a better spread between national budget and local budget for that. But then we need to onboard private finance. That is coming with a clear view of where the needs are. in each city, in each region. That comes with a clear roadmap and mapping of where those buildings are. And that comes also with industry being clearer maybe about the valuation. So we've worked a lot on this in Saint-Gobain. The green value of building, it's something which is now tangible. I would say, whatever the headwinds in politics, the markets understand it. So that brings down the visibility of those benefits to the banking sector. But then there is a level of maybe empowerment and capacity buildings, because this is not the expertise of banks to assess how good or bad a building renovation is. So here we need protocols, we need processes. We need to expand on that. Some of them, I mean, we know about good examples, we need to expand on that. And then there is still a role for public banking authorities to take on the risk, especially in those cases where the people are not able to take on debts or to take a loan, basically. So we need to get much more granular in the ability to finance renovation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something really important around language. How does the financier see the benefits of transitioning to green construction and the values behind it? That's very important. I'm going to go back to Mombasa, and I'm really curious to learning about your current priorities at the moment in the building sector, and how are you approaching decarbonization? What's your perspective on this front?
Thank you. As I'd said earlier, I think one of the critical things in trying to deal with decarbonization, we're trying first to domesticate the national framework that has been put in place, because we are among the local governments. In Kenya, we call them counties. So obviously, we work directly through a national policy that is there. So we domesticate it on our side. So in terms of what Mombasa is doing currently, is we are trying to deal with issues like urban heat, energy efficiency, issues to deal with smart climate designs. And the reason why we are doing all this, we are looking them from a lens of our local context, because we believe looking things again on a local context is very key before you start advancing in picking other innovative ideas from elsewhere. Two, I also feel as a country we are at that stage now. We are looking at things like the planning aspect of buildings, green buildings. We are looking at issues to deal with enforcement and compliance. We're still at that stage. We are not like countries in Europe that are slightly far. African context is slightly, we're still much behind.
We don't have a Green Deal yet.
Not yet, yeah. So as for African countries, mostly like us, Kenya, we are still at that, we're not yet at the maturity stage as such, but I consider we are actually at an important stage. So we are now at the level of putting those frameworks. And I believe once these frameworks are in place, we'll now be able now to transition. But we also feel there are major gaps across. One of them is financing. Financing is a major gap, and not everybody would want to get into this at the moment, because the incentives are very limited. Two, it's costly. Our people hardly understand. So there's a lot of awareness that we need to create in a bid to help developers now start getting into climate smart buildings. So that is what I can say for the Mombasa context. Thank you.
No, it's very true. I think the legislative component is really important to try to drive action. I think you mentioned compliance.
Yeah.
I think in the EU you have corporate sustainability, due diligence directive, and many other directives that usually push the private sector to act in a certain way. But in contexts like in Africa, where you don't have that and you still have the finance gap, it can become challenging. Ms. Diana, I would like to know what has been your experience on this front, on bringing big policies to the ground, and what do you see are the legislative hurdles in actually making it happen, bringing change to the ground, actually. You mentioned the role of industrial actors and how much they help accelerate the implementation of some of these policies. But is there anything that's missing that could be done to bring more solutions to the ground? I know Mannheim is definitely far ahead when it comes to decarbonization, but is there more that you think would help boost implementation of these strategies?
Yeah, I think financing is really the key and the answer. And we are maybe better than Africa, but we are not a lot better in financing the big questions, I would say, even not in Germany. Also, there is a lot of money, right? So, because, I mean, the cities are the place where the transition take place, but we will not be able to finance this, right? It's the same with the industries. They do their own transition process of their processing within their lines, but everything around has to be done by somebody else. I mean, that's what they pay tax for. But at the moment, at least, the German cities have an enormous crisis. The money is not there anymore. We are not able to bring things into action anymore. We used to have in Mannheim a climate fund of 10 million euros every year. It's 3 million now, and I'm hoping that we can at least stay with these 3 millions, but it's almost nothing to do what we have to do, yeah? So what would we need? We would need funding money from the European Union, not only for doing nice projects to talk together, but for investments, for big investments. And this is not there yet. So even they have the city agenda, which is super, but also for that, the investment is missing. Right, then the German government does not really have a big, they have like some programs on some topics like bringing more green in the cities, that's good. But to answer the big questions, they are financing the heat program to do the planning, what we already have in Mannheim. We are into the action of bringing it to the ground, and this is not financed. So also there, and we would be financed even, the European Union is asking whether the Climate Social Fund could fund this, but the German government is not bringing this on the ground so that it's financed. There would be 3 billion euros into it. We are not getting the money. So there are a lot of questions not answered yet. Yeah, right? So, and also the program for heating from the German government is struggling from one side to the other, and that's what you just said. You need concrete legislation. What we are seeing from the government is totally the different. Yeah, right. So nobody is investing anymore. That's what you're saying, and that's actually what we are seeing in our city every day, and that's the biggest problem we have.
And sorry, this was not on the script, but are there solutions like for revenue generating activities locally that don't depend on the bigger government? Have you seen some examples of that?
We are doing a lot, yeah. Like we try to do one thing is we try to do the city a lot greener, even where industries are, not only where people live. Planting every tree we are planting is a good one, right? So this is what we are really doing. We are changing, as we said, the whole heat system, and we are trying to bring energy to the industry. So this is really what we are doing as well, as far as we can. Also on the housing, we try to change this. We're giving money to everybody who is changing this for their own houses as well. So we really have a climate action plan. We know exactly what we could do to be climate neutral by 2030, but we just announced that we will not make it, because we just are missing the money. It's mainly the money, nothing else, right?
Yeah, the finance gap remains there.
That's the point.
Ms. Carré, I know you're very solutions-oriented, so I want to take you and everyone else 5 to 10 years from now. if you close your eyes, what does success look like when we talk about city-industry collaboration?
I will come back to the beginning of this panel, where you were asking me about barriers, and I think that in 5 or 10 years from now, we would have much more to say about how to crack and how to overcome what we have discussed today, so that the amount of solutions would by far exceed the barriers, which is something we have to take also on our own, basically. But it's not always just the others, just the government or just the finance, just the industry. It's something we have to practice, to challenge barriers by knowing, okay, on that I know 1 or 2 solutions, and I force myself to put that in the debate. And beyond that, maybe to flag also two things which is a bit in between: the lack of finance, the lack of speed on rolling out policies, is the capacity building in administration and local authorities that would have been ramped up, that would not be seen as, oh, we need to do that project, we don't know how. So that needs to be stable. EU can help. Recovery funds went a bit in that direction. And our end as well is to practice replicability for any kind of good project, to understand what are the conditions to do it in other circumstances. So it's a bit like sport, it's a bit the training, but I think it's super important. Thank you.
Replicability, I like that word. Mr. Francis, if I may, especially in line with what Ms. Carré was discussing, if you look at the future, especially when it comes to international cooperation and city industry partnerships, we have Europe, we have Africa. 5 to 10 years from now, what would success look like when it comes to this type of partnerships?
For me, it is clear that with the problem of climate change, Africa is now positioning itself towards decarbonization, that's for sure. We are more interested in efficient and clean energy. That's the direction we are taking. I believe cities to cities knowledge transfer, how cities learn from each other, will become key because there is need for that knowledge transfer for Africa to transition. What I see into the future, I see there will be more stronger partnership being developed between cities, government, and industries in a bid to address this bigger problem of climate change that is there and the desire to get to net zero. So I see into the future more cooperations. That's what I foresee. I also foresee a lot of knowledge transfer between cities to cities because of the cooperation that is there. So that's what I foresee into the future. Yeah.
And have you seen positive examples of that today? I think today is one of them, but do you have something to share on that front?
Yes. Currently, as Mombasa County, we enjoy a lot of sister city cooperations. And this is giving us an opportunity to share knowledge in terms of either it's climate change, what others are doing. We have those kind of sister city arrangements, particularly in Africa. For example, we have a sister city cooperation with the city of Durban, where Durban also faces a lot of unique challenges like us in South Africa. So that context helps us develop knowledge, develop capacity in terms of exactly how we're dealing with issues of climate change. Thank you.
Really good. Ms. Diana, I think I will end with you. What does the future look like, a successful future look like for you when it comes to these types of collaborations?
I think we have to find together the solutions. We have to bring the companies together and understand as governments, cities, or the European Union, whoever, what the industry need. We need clear energy for everybody. This is, to me, the key. Yeah, and then we can go together, and this has to be fast. So to me, for this, we really need to invest very fast. And then, of course, we need also green surroundings that are good for everybody as a solution. For that, we need the fundings I was just talking about.
That's really good. And I hope 5 to 10 years from now, we're having this discussion from a completely different perspective where partnerships have been strengthened and we can engage a lot more on this front. And I just heard the gong. I want to ask a huge round of applause for our amazing panel. And I want to thank ICLEI Europe for the opportunity. My name is Shana. I'm a Hamburg Sustainability Conference Youth Ambassador. It was a pleasure being with all of you. And I will hand back to Matthew Bach for the closing remarks. Matthew?
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to be brief because we heard the gong, and discipline is crucial here. But I think what we heard very clearly in this panel is that the cities are ready and industry is ready, and I think that's a strong basis to move from. Now, of course, how can we ensure that we work together to create the conditions that we need to overcome the uncertainty, to overcome the financing gap, to keep doing this work, and as you said, in 5-10 years to actually be much further, not just much further, but to really be at climate neutrality, because we do not have time. And I think that's the point that we need to say loud and clear. We don't have the luxury of saying, let's wait another 10, 20 years to do this work. We have to do it now. And so the good news is then, those who need to actually implement and build the solutions and make our cities climate neutral are ready. We need to work together on how to do this. And so what we want to start from this session moving forward is we want to build then not just the roadmaps, we have those, but we want to build the alliances. We want to move forward on these types of formats of dialogues. We want to upscale this. We want to bring together the different actors that we need to create these solutions, to drive forward even faster. And I think in that regard, what's crucial is that we need to realize that this transition is not going to happen without the cooperation. And there is a place for all the actors, and we need to make space for them. The national governments, the IFIs, the different funders, and the different regions of the world. And if we do this work, and we do it quickly, and with all of you, then we're going to get there, and this is just the beginning in some ways. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you.